What would you do if you woke up in a freezing hut with no idea where you were, a stone axe in the corner, and a voice inside your skull telling you the night could kill you?
That is exactly where Jang Hyun found himself on his first night in the dark world, and he had no intention of dying.
One moment, he was a college student, about to fall asleep in his dorm.
The next, he was sitting upright in a thatched hut, barely bigger than a bathroom stall, throat raw, eyes burning, a small bonfire crackling in the dirt floor.
Outside, the wind howled like something alive. The darkness beyond the walls was total, the kind that swallowed sound and light and hope all at once.
Before he could even process where he was, a voice cut directly into his mind. Not through his ears, inside his skull, calm and precise.
It called him a survivor and welcomed him to the dark world.
It told him the bonfire was the only thing standing between him and the creatures in the night.
It told him daylight was short and precious, that shelters were non-negotiable, and that a manual would guide him if he protected it well.
It warned him that every natural month a disaster would be drawn at random.
And then it signed off with one last line. Good luck favors those who strive. Not a threat, not exactly a promise.
More like a dare.
Jang Hyun took a long, slow breath of smoky air, stood up, and started looking for the manual.
In a hut this small, there were not many hiding spots.
He found it in the corner, a black handbook the size of a notebook, sitting beside a chipped stone axe that barely qualified as a tool.
The moment he touched the cover, information poured directly into his head.
The manual was not just a book. It was the core of his shelter. If it was damaged, the shelter took damage too.
He handled it with new respect.
The first page logged the environment in real time. Heavy fog, strong winds, outdoor temperature at -7.1 degrees Celsius, and night remaining at 2 hours and 32 minutes.
The numbers ticked down as he watched, like a clock counting towards something. The second page was a chat channel, world, region, and friends. The world channel showed over 8 billion active users, dropping by hundreds of thousands per second.
8 billion?
The entire population of the planet, all transmigrated at once.
Jang Hyun switched to the regional channel, locked at exactly 10,000 people, and the messages were already flooding in.
Someone begging for police help. A police officer from another country saying he wanted to call the police too.
Arguments about whether this was a government experiment.
Parents calling for children they would never find.
And then, mid-sentence, someone reported hearing wolves outside.
He said he had opened the door to look and the wind had blown his flame out.
Then he screamed. Then nothing.
The regional counter clicked from 10,000 to 9,999.
The chat went silent for more than 10 seconds.
When someone finally typed again, the message was short, and everyone read it the same way.
The bonfire must not go out at night.
Jang Hyun looked at his own fire and felt his heart pound.
He had already understood the rule intellectually. Now, he understood it in his chest.
He read the remaining pages of the manual in silence.
Third page, a trade channel, empty for now.
Fourth page, upgrades. A level 1 thatched hut could become a level 2 wooden house for 100 units of wood and 20 units of stone. Everything after that was blank. Waiting. He closed the book, reread the 6 precautions, and made a decision.
2 hours of night left, not enough to act, enough to rest.
He sat cross-legged by the fire and forced himself into half-sleep, never trusting the dark enough to go fully under.
With 20 minutes left until dawn, he jolted awake and ran through warm-up exercises inside the shelter.
No wasted daylight.
No injuries from cold muscles.
He weighed the stone axe in his hand. The manual called it below black iron rank, essentially a no-rank tool, and waited for night to end.
When the day finally came, the temperature leapt from the negatives to a survivable single digit, and the panel updated to show 8 hours of daylight remaining.
8 hours. That was everything.
He did not sprint out of the shelter the moment light appeared.
He watched the regional channel first, checking if anyone reported immediate danger on the way out.
Nobody did. He stepped through the curtain into dewy grass and soft morning sounds.
The scene was almost peaceful.
He gripped the axe tighter because of it.
Whatever had pulled 8 billion people from their lives had not done it to give them a vacation.
He started exploring east.
About 300 meters out, the bright forest gave way to an absolute boundary of darkness, thick and unnatural, with howls drifting from somewhere inside it.
He stopped. His explorable ring was 300 meters across.
He pivoted and started looking for resources.
15 minutes of searching along the dark border turned up something he had not expected. A wooden treasure chest hidden in the shadow of the weeds, its clasp catching sunlight for just a moment.
The manual tagged it black iron rake.
He dragged it into the open and opened it without ceremony.
3 items: a can of fermented herring he immediately marked as trade goods, a bottle of plain water that tasted sweeter than any beverage he had ever had, and a blueprint for a small wooden water bucket.
10-liter capacity. 3 units of wood to craft.
He recognized the weight of what he was holding immediately.
In a world where everyone was thirsty and containers were scarce, this blueprint was not just useful.
It was a production line waiting to happen.
He used it on the spot and confirmed he had mastered the manufacturing technique. Then he spent the rest of the morning chopping trees, running the math, and sweating through the birch grove while trying not to think about how little time remained.
1 tree every 8 minutes.
1 unit of wood. He was never going to grind his way to the upgrade through chopping alone.
6 hours later, with the sky beginning to darken, he found his second chest.
Bronze grade, dark green, wedged perfectly in the leaves of a freshly felled birch.
He would have missed it entirely if the sun had not hit it at exactly the right angle.
He carried it back toward the shelter and opened it with trembling hands.
4 items.
A rock-hard baguette that doubled as a weapon. A disposable lighter with 2/3 of its fuel left. A bronze-grade axe that made the air whistle when he swung it.
And a 4th item that made the bronze axe fall out of his grip entirely.
A Fountain of Mutation, silver rank, sustainable. A small bottle of pale purple liquid that, when placed in the ground, would generate 100 milliliters of mutated spring water every single day.
Ingestion caused unknown mutations in any living creature.
Unknown, uncontrolled, potentially catastrophic.
Jang Hyun stared at it and promised himself he would never drink it.
That night, when the reward system announced his first day score at 293 points, he received a silver lottery wheel.
The wheel landed on a skill scroll. Eye of Taming, silver rank, granting the ability to tame any creature whose spiritual power was lower than his own. He used it inside the shelter.
The pain was like needles driving through his left eye, and he hit the floor screaming.
Half a minute later, it was over, and a faint purple glow had taken up permanent residence in his iris.
He had a taming skill and no creatures to test it on. Or so he thought, until he opened the chest where he had left the baguette. Swarming across his only food, mandibles cutting through rock-hard crust like it was nothing, were dozens of large black ants, soybean-sized, scythe-jawed, completely at home on his dinner.
His first reaction was anger.
His second was something more useful.
He focused his left eye on the nearest ant and activated Eye of Taming for the first time.
A faint purple flicker, a connection that clicked open like a door, and the ant froze mid-bite. He could feel its thoughts, primitive and simple, and bend them to his will. He swept his gaze across the rest of the swarm, one after another, until 63 black scythe ants stood in a perfect line on the floor.
The control had a ceiling. He could feel a soft pressure in his mind marking the limit, but the proof of concept was undeniable. He looked at the Fountain of Mutation sitting in the center of the room, and the idea arrived fully formed. Mutation was unpredictable, beneficial or harmful, and ants were cheap and plentiful,
and entirely expendable.
The math was simple. Run enough of them through the mutation process, and the lucky survivors would be worth far more than the losses.
He ordered all 63 to drink from the fountain.
22 did not survive the transformation.
Most of the remainder came out grotesquely deformed, extra legs, missing mandibles, bodies bloated beyond function.
But 8 came through clean.
Thumb-sized, shiny black, 10-centimeter scythe mandibles, and a new panel tag. Black scythe hunting ant. Black iron rank. 10-fold biting force.
From ants that could chew hard bread to ants that could potentially chew through rock.
Jang Hyun stared at his 8 new soldiers and smiled for the first time since arriving.
He had no queen, no colony, no army yet.
But the direction was set.
While the World Channel erupted over a new temporary mission, upgrade your shelter and race for regional top 100 for skill selection rewards, he was already planning the next step.
Find the queen.
In the meantime, he had resources to gather.
He poured the Fountain of Mutation into a hollow he dug in the shelter floor, confirmed it had formed a permanent fountain, and turned to the trade channel.
7 buckets sold in 10 seconds, 60 wood and 4 stone.
Silver rank spring water portions, 5 milliliters each, listed at 13 wood or 2 stone, cleared in minutes as buyers chased the rarity.
The trade traps were working.
When the upgrade threshold was met, he paid the cost, watched the shelter transform, and listened for the broadcast.
Top 10% globally for speed.
And then the sharper announcement, first in the region.
Reward, Skill Selection Package, Gold Rank. The gold card spun and split into 3 glowing options: Water Elemental Affinity, Berserk, or Species Contract.
He read each carefully.
Water affinity with no water skills was dead weight.
Berserk, with an unspecified recovery penalty in a world where a single day of weakness could mean death, was unacceptable. Species Contract, greatly enhances control over a contracted species, was vague, but it pointed exactly where he was already going. He chose it.
And when the system asked which species to contract, the only creatures he had tamed were ants.
He named them. Species Contract. Ants.
A beat of silence.
Then the system confirmed the contracted species cannot be changed.
He stood very still for about 3 minutes.
His dream of becoming a dragon knight played its final scene and exited quietly.
Then he exhaled, looked at a hunting ant, and the panel expanded farther than it ever had before.
Not just rank and ability, potential ceiling, mutation type, current evolution success rate, and which food materials would accelerate it.
The species contract was not a combat skill.
It was a cultivation roadmap for every ant he would ever own.
Worth the slut.
He accepted the warmth package from the global top 10% reward, pulled on the cotton suit, felt his hands thaw for the first time, and slept.
Day 3 announced itself with a cold wave warning.
7 days until an extreme low-temperature disaster would lock down the entire dark continent.
Daytime had already shrunk from 8 hours to 7.5.
The regional counter read 9,531.
Nearly 500 people gone in 2 days. Every number a life. Every digit a quiet door closing somewhere in the dark.
Jang Hyun did not linger on it.
He had a queen to find.
He sent his 8 hunting ants outside with orders to track black scythe ant pheromones and locate the colony's queen.
Then he explored the boundary between his safe zone and the new territory. Species Contract had told him his level 2 shelter expanded his range to 500 meters, but mutated beasts now patrolled the outer ring.
His ally Cheongha, a plant specialist in another region who had already been trading with him since day 1, confirmed it by message. Level 2 means a 500-meter radius and beasts that are very hard to deal with without strong combat.
He retreated to the birch grove.
2 hours later, as he was preparing to pivot back to bucket crafting, something pinged through the species contract. He turned.
The lead hunting ant was dragging a fat abdomened ant toward him,
and the other 7 were herding more than 100 black scythe ants like officers with prisoners.
The queen. He activated Eye of Taming before she could react, and the entire colony went still.
Taming the queen meant controlling the colony. No spiritual power cost per worker, just one connection to the source.
The species contract expanded her panel. Black scythe ant queen, no rank, potential silver, type reproductive, mutation evolution success rate 48%.
48 was decent, but for an irreplaceable queen, only 100 was truly safe.
He opened the tray channel and filtered for flesh. He found Will Porter, a man clearly built to fight, selling mutated rabbit and mutated boar meat at scale, and opened negotiations.
Will offered a small gift alongside the meat purchase, vials of mutated rabbit blood and boar blood that also raised mutation rates, effectively a discount.
Jang Hyun took the deal and fed the queen. Black iron rabbit meat pushed her rate from 48 toward the 50s.
Bronze boar meat pushed faster.
He switched her to the boar and watched the number climb to 65 before she stopped, not from saturation, but from being completely, gloriously, helplessly full.
She was too round to move.
He laughed, ordered her to digest, then returned to the trees.
Half an hour later, her rate hit 100.
He brought her to the fountain, watched 1 milliliter of purple liquid disappear into her body, and held his breath.
The transformation was fast. Black Scythe Hunter Ant Queen, Black Iron rank, rapid reproduction unlocked, breeding hunting ants directly, no more individual upgrades required.
The bottleneck was broken.
That same afternoon, Cheongha sent a message with an unexpected gift attached. While loosening soil for her crops, she had found a century ant queen, 3 pairs of compound eyes, fast-moving, built for reconnaissance, and offered it to him for free. He pushed back immediately. She pushed back harder. They settled on seeds in exchange, and the century ant queen arrived in a small wooden bottle alongside 20 of her workers.
The panel told him what Cheongha could not see. Potential bronze rank, type reproductive, current mutation evolution success rate 67%, fed by plant materials.
A scout queen who ate wood instead of wheat.
Brutally cost-effective. He traded sandalwood from Cheongha's supply to push her rate to 100, ran her through the fountain, and watched the century ants evolve. Century ant queen, black iron rank, rapid reproduction. Century workers, black iron rank, basic agility.
He let one move.
It crossed the shelter in seconds.
For that body size, the speed was absurd.
2 queens. 1 for combat, 1 for scouting.
The Ant Knight was assembling his army. The next morning brought another temporary mission, 3 chests hidden somewhere in each survivor's territory, first come, first served, regional top 100 by count and speed, earning skill selection rewards. He did not search with his eyes.
He sent the century ants.
8 squads of 20, 1 per direction, fanning out across the snow-dusted territory with orders to find chests and report mutated beasts. The hunting ants followed as carriers. 23 fist-sized bronze hunting ants moving through fresh snow, each one the product of days of careful cultivation.
2 chests arrived at his feet in under 15 minutes, carried without ceremony by ants who did not understand what they had accomplished.
The 3rd chest was the problem. A century ant squad found it under the head of a sleeping mutated wild boar, Bronze rank, chargeability, thick skin, 300 kilograms of territorial bad mood using the chest as a pillow.
He could not fight it directly.
Instead, he ordered 40 sentry ants to swarm its ears, nostrils, and eye corners, the only places where thick skin did not matter.
The boar erupted from sleep screaming and charged into the forest.
10 hunting ants moved in, grabbed the chest, and marched back.
49 minutes and 53 seconds from start to finish.
First in the region.
Reward, one self-selected gold rank item.
He opened the gold box, expecting a weapon.
He received 3 choices. A pursuit longbow with auto-correction. A detection telescope that saw through darkness past 500 meters. And a gene manipulator that extracted genetic fragments from any biological material and implanted them into other organisms.
The longbow required strength he did not have, and arrows he did not own.
The telescope was impressive, but redundant. His sentry ants did not need eyes to scout. The gene manipulator, however, was something else entirely. He could see the branches immediately. Boar genes into hunting ants for raw power.
Avian genes into century ants for flying scouts.
Spider venom into queen breeding lines.
Aquatic genes for river reconnaissance.
Any creature, any trait, fed through ant reproduction at scale. He chose it without hesitation. The first test used Will's boar blood, 5 gene fragments extracted and implanted into a single hunting ant. The ant twisted violently, went still, then charged outside and ate an entire birch tree to complete the fusion. When it came back, it was the size of a small pig, bristle-covered, with half-meter mandibles. Bronze hunting ant fused with mutated wild boar genes. No one looking at it would call it an ant. He fused 20 more in the same session. Then, he looked toward the boar's lair. The boar had crushed 28 of his sentry ants in the chest retrieval. He had sentenced it. Now, he had the means to collect. He took the 20 gene-modified hunting ants and walked 460 meters to the boar's cave. The boar charged the moment it sensed them. The ants did not flinch.
In seconds, the boar was gone, reduced to a pool of blood and scattered material.
Jang Hyun watched from 100 meters away and felt something shift in his chest. Yesterday, he had fled from a mutated squirrel with 2 gashes through his jacket. Today, 20 modified ants had reduced a 300-kilogram bronze beast to nothing. The shape of his survival had changed in 2 days. The butchering took minutes. But when he counted the yield, 30 gin of muscle meat, 1 gin of blood, 1 hide, and a pair of 30-centimeter tusks, something was wrong. A 300-kilogram boar should yield far more. He pushed through the offal with his machete and found it, a red walnut-sized orb, dense and warm in his palm. Beast core. Bronze grade. The missing weight had condensed into this.
Not a tool, not food. Condensed life essence from the first bronze creature he had hunted.
He pocketed it immediately and added it to the do-not-sell pile. With the boar meat and 4 black iron mutated rabbits cleared from the territory ring, his food stockpile was beginning to look real. His wood reserve, between fence sales and hunting ant labor, was climbing past 800 units. Stone at 200. He opened the manual and spent 630 wood on a stone purchase from a desperate seller named Yi Ki-chan, who negotiated hard but ultimately needed the wood too badly to hold out. Then he initiated the level 3 upgrade. He watched from a distance as a globe of darkness wrapped his 20-square-meter wooden house and dissolved to reveal an 80-square-meter exquisite wooden house on a stone-laid base. Space, insulation, structural integrity, all step changes. New facilities unlocked. Level 1 farmland, Level 1 animal pen, Level 1 workbench. He built all 3 at once. The farmland alone was more square meters at a cheaper cost per unit than anything he had bought from the trade channel. The workbench cut crafting time and fatigue both. The pen gave his growing ant colony a proper home. That night, he roasted boar and rabbit on the stove. Seasoned with cumin and chili powder, he traded Cheongha 2 skewers to obtain, and ate the best meal he had tasted since arriving in the dark world. Ranked meat was not just food. After eating, he could feel warmth spreading through his muscles, physique incrementally improving. He committed to chasing ranked ingredients from that night forward.
After dinner, he walked to the ant nest to check on the Hunter Queen's progress.
The panel read 87%. He fed her 4 jin of bronze boar meat.
The rate spiked to 100.
She walked to the fountain, drank 5 milliliters, and the mutation began.
The silver evolution took longer than bronze. 5 minutes of swelling and restructuring, and when it finished, the queen was 70 to 80 centimeters long, her abdomen banded with layered silver ring patterns that caught the firelight like ornament. Her mandibles had nearly vanished, traded for reproductive capacity, and 3 new abilities glowed in her panel: rapid reproduction, production expansion, rapid development.
Rapid development meant she could inject energy into newly hatched larvae and force them to mature instantly at double the food cost for those moments when numbers were needed yesterday.
He looked at her for a long moment, then gave her a name. Moo.
Inkmoan. She straightened her upper body, waved her small scythes, and made a rustling sound the species contract decoded directly into his head.
Delicious.
The master's food was delicious.
He stared at her.
Then around the empty shelter. Then back at her.
She had crossed the silver threshold, and the intelligence had come with it.
She was not a robot executing commands anymore. She was communicating. He gave her a name, told her to breed strong ants, and left her to manage her own harem.
Silver intelligence was an inflection point, not just for Mu Wu. If silver mutated beasts roaming his level 3 territory had the same threshold, the danger had just been redefined.
He pushed the thought aside. He had 3 more productive hours before the exhaustion became dangerous. By morning, the hunting ant nest had grown deep enough that the tunnel entrance was a meter wide, and Mo Wu had already begun laying the first silver-grade eggs. The gene-modified boar-fused hunting ants were too large for the indoor nest and would need an outdoor enclosure, a project for the next day. He had the Century Ant Queen's workers, now approaching 150, sweeping the full 500-meter ring in coordinated patrol routes. Every chest, every mutated beast, every unusual plant in his territory would be flagged within minutes of appearing.
The blind spots were closing.
On day 4, the cold wave counter-ticked to 6 days remaining, and the regional total had fallen to 9,500. Each daily reduction was slower than the first night's spike, but steady.
Attrition in the dark world did not always announce itself.
Sometimes it was just a number that was slightly lower than yesterday.
He turned his attention to a blueprint he had been carrying since the black iron chest retrieval: quick hemostatic bandage, bronze grade.
The craft chain required 3 separate process materials: adhesive, coagulation serum, and plant fiber, none of which were raw resources. Each had its own production line behind it.
He sourced the adhesive from a seller named Yo Hisal for 50 wood. He contacted Will for coagulation serum, and what followed was the kind of exchange that reminded him the dark world was not entirely composed of strangers trying to take from him. Will offered 15 portions free just for a single finished bandage.
Jang Hyun refused the discount, paid market rate, and promised Will the first bandage produced at normal market price. No charity in either direction, just 2 people building something durable.
Will sent the vials and a quiet note of genuine warmth that he kept to himself.
Plant fiber came from Cheongha, 39 portions, offered as byproduct from her daily stockwork. He refused the gift and traded spring water. She accepted, then added casually that she had something important to discuss. Not a trade this time, something more deliberate.
He would find out what that was before the night was over. The workbench cut bandage crafting time from 10 minutes to 9.5 per unit. Minor savings per piece, compounding to hours saved at volume. The first bandage went to Will as promised.
Will sent back 200 wood and 10 gen of bronze boar meat, well above cost, and a warning Jang Hyun filed away carefully.
Medical items were not priced by rank in the Dark World.
The system appeared to be deliberately limiting their raw materials, keeping medical supply artificially scarce.
A bronze bandage that resolved blood loss distorted the survival rate the Dark World seemed to be enforcing.
The pipeline he was building, plant fiber from Cheongha, coagulation serum from Will, adhesive from Yohi Sol, was not just a craft chain.
It was a soft rebellion against a system trying to keep people dying.
That thought stayed with him as he lined the finished vials and adhesive units on the workbench shelf and watched the stockpile grow.
Outside, the hunting ants had already cleared the birch grove.
He had sent them out in the afternoon expecting modest results and returned to find over 2,000 units of clean trimmed logs stacked with craftsman precision in the space where the entire forest had stood. He stared at the stuffs.
3 hours of ant labor had outpaced what he could have accomplished in a month of solo chopping. He laughed once, quietly, and flagged the remaining scattered trees for tomorrow's run. The species contract update he had requested from the system was beginning to arrive in practice. The more he directed, the more efficiently his colony responded. Ants as scalable infrastructure was no longer a theory.
It was a cleared forest and a full wood stockpile.
That night, with the stove burning warm and Moo Woo settled in her breeding chamber, Cheongha sent her important message. After several days of interaction and trade, she said she felt he was someone worth trusting. Good strength, she said. Good character. Excellent cooking, she added, which she appeared to consider equally important. Then she said she wanted to form a real alliance. Not the verbal agreement they already had. Something documented, deliberate, and mutual, because the dangers of the Dark World were far larger than either of them could handle alone. He read the message twice. He had been thinking about this too. Specialization was the only logical path in a world full of infinite variables, but every specialization came with a blind spot. His blind spot was plants. Hers was combat. His ants could scout and fight.
Her crops could feed and heal.
Neither of them was complete without the other.
And there was something else.
Cheongha had upgraded to level 2 before the first temporary mission even dropped. She had pushed 300 wood across a cross-region link without pausing to check her balance. She had a tree she called Little Green that she spoke to like a person, one that rustled its leaves in apparent response. She was not just a competent ally. She was something more unusual than that, and he had not yet asked the right questions. He replied that he agreed. That night in her shelter, 30 meters up in the branches of a tree, so wide it would take more than a dozen people to encircle it, Cheongha held a golden scroll and considered her next step. Mutual aid contract, gold rank. Select a target, establish a bond that prevented either party from harming the other, with optional teleportation between shelters. 5 uses total. She had been carrying it since she found it in a bronze chest, waiting for someone worth using it on. Below her, 1,000 square meters of field stretched across the base of the giant tree. Half was ripe multi-year winter wheat she had not bothered to harvest yet, the kind of surplus that would make other survivors feel sick with envy. The other half was strange new species,
mutations she had coaxed from seed combinations no standard botany textbook would recognize. She murmured something to Little Green. The tree's leaves rustled back, and she returned to her workbench to compound ripening agent from the row of labeled bottles arranged by viscosity and hue.
A botanist's granddaughter's inheritance, she liked to say.
Whatever Little Green was, it was not an ordinary tree.
And whatever Cheongha was, she was not an ordinary plant specialist.
Jang Hyun did not know all of this yet.
He knew enough.
On the 5th day, the cold wave was 5 days out, and the outdoor temperature in the mornings had dropped to near -10.
Daytime had shrunk again. 7 hours now, maybe less tomorrow. The dark world was compressing the window to act and expanding the cost of every mistake.
He woke to Mo Wu's breeding report delivered through the species contract. The first silver hunting ants had hatched and were ready for gene fusion.
He walked to the pen and counted.
11 silver-grade hunting ants, each already larger than the bronze-fused workers had been before their boar gene integration.
The fusions would compound. Silver ants could accept 2 gene sets after the silver threshold, per the gene manipulator's notes.
He processed the remaining boar blood first, ran it through the manipulator, and extracted enough fragments for the first 8.
8 silver hunting ants with boar genes fused went still, then charged outside to eat.
When they came back, each one was the size of a large dog. Jet black carapace, mandibles that had grown past the length of his forearm, bodies dense enough that a casual tap sounded like striking metal.
He stood in the pen entrance and looked at his army.
The Dragon Knight dream was not just dead.
It had been replaced by something more specific and considerably more effective.
He ordered a scouting sweep of the outer territory, the ring from 500 to 2,000 meters that would unlock what the level 4 upgrade, which Cheongha had warned would introduce roaming silver mutated beasts. Sentry ants fanned along the perimeter, while hunting ants held a loose patrol line at the 500-meter edge. No incursions.
The silver beasts were out there, but had not tested his boundary yet. In the afternoon, with fresh intel and a stable perimeter, he turned to the ant nest nucleus, the bronze-grade artifact Cheongha had found on his behalf, placed in the colony's shared nest, compounding breeding speed by 20% and food consumption by 30%.
The 30% food consumption had looked like a tax at first.
But food drove mutation rates, and 30% more food meant 30% faster evolution.
The nucleus was not a tax. It was a hidden accelerant. Mo Wu's silver breeding output with the nucleus active was already outpacing what his original 8 hunting ants could have produced in a week. Numbers were the one thing ants could always win on, and the nucleus was the engine behind the numbers.
As the sun dipped toward the horizon, a signal pinged from the sentry ant patrol.
Something moving along the perimeter.
Not a silver mutated beast, smaller, fast, and familiar.
He checked the relay and frowned.
A black iron mutated rabbit, separated from the pack, nosing along the territory edge.
He sent 4 gene-fused hunting ants to intercept.
The encounter lasted less time than it took him to set the order. 15 gin of black iron rabbit meat added to the food line.
More importantly, it answered a question he had been carrying.
The ant army could now hunt without him.
He could sit inside the shelter, craft, manage trades, sleep, and the colony would maintain, defend, and harvest the territory on its own schedule.
The labor dispatch idea from earlier in the week resurfaced.
If the species contract held across distance, if tamed ants stayed loyal and responsive, even when sent to work in Cheongha's field, the model was a rental service with zero overhead and margins nothing in the trade channel could match.
He flagged it for the next time Cheongha mentioned her wheat harvest problem.
Which was likely to be soon, given how much ripe wheat she had been ignoring.
He spent the night crafting fences and bandages in alternating batches on the workbench.
Fence demand had climbed again as the cold wave countdown spread anxiety through every region.
People who had ignored shelter defense were scrambling.
Bandage demand was quieter, but more urgent. Will had already referred him to contacts who were hunting at a level where blood loss was a daily calculation.
The medical supply chain was tightening around those references.
He noted the pattern. Hunters who pushed into dangerous territory needed medical support to stay operational. He could supply that support, which meant the hunter stayed alive and kept pushing, which meant more beast cores and meat and gene material flowing through his trade network.
Every alliance point connected to every other.
Specialization was not isolation.
Done right, it was the hub of a wheel.
By midnight, his wood reserve had crossed 1,000 units again, despite the facility spending in the Level 3 upgrade.
The hunting ants felling trees and the fence sales together kept the number climbing faster than he could spend it.
He checked his food stockpile.
20 gin of multi-year winter wheat already processed.
Another 100 seeds planted in the Level 1 farmland, dosed with ripening agent.
22 gin of sweet potatoes from the boar den clearings. Rabbit meat, boar meat, rye bread, a baguette reserve, 9 red heart fruits, and Cheongha's mutated seasonings that somehow made every meal feel like a small victory against the dark world. Cold wave food, check. Firewood, climbing.
Warm gear from the cotton suit and quilt, and the knitted gloves from the black iron temporary chest.
Level 3 shelter with improved insulation, already keeping the indoor temperature above 14 degrees even before the stove was lit.
He was as prepared as he could be for a disaster he had never experienced in a world he had inhabited for less than a week. On the 6th day, with 4 days until the cold wave hit, Cheongha sent the item information that made him want to immediately message her back with a string of exclamation points he suppressed for dignity.
Ant nest nucleus had been one niche find.
What she sent now was something different.
She had been in contact with someone, a survivor who considered ants useless and had sold ant-related items cheaply to clear storage space.
The items in question were exactly what the next phase of the colony required.
He confirmed the trade, sent a generous portion of spring water in exchange, and started planning how to integrate the new materials into the breeding line.
At the same time, Mo Wu sent a signal through the species contract that required his immediate attention.
The first silver hunting ants to receive double gene fusions, boar genes, and a second set he had been testing with rabbit blood for speed enhancement were showing panel readings he had not seen before. The speed gene and the strength gene were not just stacking independently. They were interacting.
The resulting ant moved at bronze century ant pace, with hunting ant destructive power, a combination that had no natural equivalent in any species he had tamed or fought.
He stared at the panel for a long time.
This was what the gene manipulator had promised in theory. This was what it looked like in practice. A single ant was an experiment.
100 ants built on the same fusion template was a fighting force with no reference point in the Dark World's existing tier system.
He set a production target, 50 double-fused silver hunting ants before the cold wave hit. The food cost was steep, but manageable with the territory hunt yielding regularly.
The gene fragment supply would need Will to keep hunting bronze-mutated beasts and send blood in bulk.
He sent the request, and Will replied within minutes. He was already in the process of tracking a bronze-mutated bear at the edge of his own territory and would have blood by nightfall. These were the connections that made the difference. Not resources, not luck, though both mattered, but the right people doing the right work in the right directions. The cold wave was 4 days out. He did not feel fear. He felt the shape of the problem and the gaps he still needed to close. Gap 1. Silver mutated beasts in the Level 3 territory ring he had not yet tested his army against. Gap 2. Bandage raw material supply from Yohai Seoul and Cheongha was reliable but thin. One disruption would pause production entirely. Gap 3. The gene manipulator's material supply was entirely dependent on hunting, which was dependent on Will staying operational, which brought him back to the bandage supply problem in a closed loop. 3 gaps, all connected, all with the same solution. The alliance with Cheongha had to formalize and broaden before the cold wave sealed everyone indoors for weeks. He sent her a long message that night, while the stove crackled and Mo Wu moved steadily through her breeding cycle. He laid out the supply chain logic. Her plants fed his colony, his ants could harvest her fields, his bandages could keep the hunters who fed his gene supply operational, and her mutated plant extracts could produce materials he had not yet developed.
An antitoxin line.
A concentrated nutritional supplement.
An anti-inflammatory compound that could make red heartfruit physique buffs a daily tool rather than a recovery emergency.
She read the message slowly, then replied with the gold scroll.
Mutual aid contract.
She sent the item information, then added quietly she had been waiting for the right person to use this on. He read the terms. Neither party could harm the other. Both could teleport to the other's shelter with permission. 5 uses total.
He accepted.
The contract sealed between two people who had never stood in the same room and had only met through a chat channel, where the world counter was dropping by hundreds of thousands per second.
It was the most formal thing that had happened to him since transmigration, and it felt more real than most of what he had done before arriving in the dark world.
On the 7th day, 3 days until the cold wave, the outdoor temperature had crossed -15 in the morning readings.
Daytime was down to 6.5 hours.
The regional counter had fallen below 9,400.
He woke before dawn, checked on Mo Wu's overnight production, 17 new silver hunting ants and larval maturation, and began the morning fusion session before breakfast.
The double-fused silver hunting ant count was at 31. 19 to go before his target. He broke the session at 38, close enough.
The food cost of the final 12 could be better directed into Mo Wu's silver to gold push, which was theoretical but not impossible.
The beast core from the wild boar had not left his inventory.
He had been testing a hypothesis. Condensed life essence from a bronze creature might function as a high-density gene source for the manipulator.
The trade channel had no listings for beast core use, no blueprints, no manual annotations.
If his hypothesis was right, he was the first person to test it. He placed the bronze beast core on the gene manipulator's platform. The readout expanded farther than any blood sample had. Not 5 fragments, but 23. Higher density and higher quality markers than anything he had extracted from raw meat or blood.
His expression changed.
Beast cores were not just rare drops. They were compressed gene libraries. He had been treating them as curiosities. They were the single most efficient fuel source the gene manipulator accepted.
He sat with that information for a full minute before moving.
Then he messaged Will. Will, do you keep beast cores when you hunt?
In his shelter, surrounded by tanned hides and carefully organized weapons, Will frowned at the question. He had been selling cores to whoever offered decent prices.
Bronze cores at 70 to 80 wood each.
He replied that he had been selling them. Jang Hyun replied, "Keep them for me from now on. I will pay 20% above your best offer, no upper limit."
Will agreed, without needing to know why. Trustworthy people did not usually specify volume limits and then walk back later.
In the field that afternoon, with 38 double-fused silver hunting ants patrolling the 500-meter perimeter and 180 sentry ants running intelligence on the outer ring, the territory felt smaller than it had a week ago.
Not because the ground had shrunk.
Because he understood it now. Every chest location the sentry ants had ever flagged was logged. Every mutated beast den and patrol route was mapped. The squirrel den had been cleared. 15 gen of nuts and seeds, exactly as Cheongha had predicted. The red heartfruit tree had been harvested to the last fruit, the branch broken off and traded to Cheongha for cultivation. The sweet potato patch from the boar's former territory had been fully cleared and replanted in the farmland.
Nothing in the 500-meter ring was unknown.
The level 4 upgrade would push that boundary to 2,000 meters and introduce silver mutated beasts that did not stay in fixed territories.
He was not afraid of that. He was preparing for it. The key difference between facing a bronze mutated boar and a roaming silver mutated beast was early warning.
A sleeping boar could be lured.
A silver beast with the same intelligence inflection Mo Wu had crossed might not be lured.
He designed a century ant chain along the perimeter edge for the new territory. Not search teams, but a standing relay that would pass signals back to him within seconds of a silver beast entering the area.
Then he designed the response. 20 double-fused hunting ants at immediate dispatch, 10 more in reserve, a rapid development injection from Mo Wu for emergency reinforcement if the first wave needed backup.
The plan had holes.
He listed them. Filled 2 of them with better relay spacing and a designated fallback point near the shelter's fence line.
Left one open. What happened if a silver beast had intelligence enough to circle the perimeter rather than crossing it, bypassing the relay chain entirely?
He flagged it as the problem to solve before initiating the level 4 upgrade.
In the late afternoon, Cheongha used the mutual aid contract for the first time.
She arrived in his shelter not with a warning, not with a trade request, but with a wooden crate of ripening agent and a question she had been saving.
Did he know what he was actually building?
He said yes.
An ant colony scaled past anything the Dark World had seen, backed by a medical supply chain and a food production line, and a gene library growing with every beast core his hunters collected.
She shook her head.
That was what it looked like from outside. From inside, she said it looked like something larger.
The Dark World system had not given anyone a single dominant path.
Randomness was built into every chest, every skill scroll, every lottery wheel.
But Jang Hyun had taken a path the system had almost certainly not modeled. Not a combat class, not a crafter class, not a farmer class, but an infrastructure class that reproduced itself.
Every ant Mo Wu bred was a unit of production.
Every gene fusion was a capability upgrade that cost no additional spiritual power to maintain. Every alliance point was a node in a network that grew stronger the more nodes it connected.
The Dark World wanted survivors to die at predictable rates.
He was building something that compounded.
The silence between them lasted long enough to feel intentional.
Then he offered her a red heart fruit skewer left over from the morning's roast, and she accepted it with exactly the kind of dignity that pretended she had not been waiting for it.
They ate in the warmth of the level 3 shelter with the stove burning and Mo Wu's quiet signals threading through the species contract in the background, a steady rhythm of production, communication, acknowledgement.
The cold wave was 3 days out.
The regional counter was still falling.
Somewhere in the 10,000 regions distributed across the Dark Continent, most survivors were still counting firewood and hoping their level 2 walls held. He had 38 double-fused silver hunting ants, 180 sentry ants with basic agility and beginner detection, a silver queen who called him master and produced 20 new soldiers per day, a farmland plot that would yield its first harvest before the cold wave hit, a bandage supply chain connected to the best hunter in his trade network, a gene library that was about to expand to beast core density, and an alliance with a plant specialist who spoke to a world tree.
He was not safe. No one was safe in the Dark World.
But he was, for the first time since waking up in that thatched hut, genuinely prepared. The cold wave arrived on schedule, silent and absolute. The morning panel read outdoor temperature -31 degrees Celsius.
Daytime had dropped to 5 hours.
The dark came in at the edges of the shortened day, like something that had been waiting patiently for this moment.
He had prepared for cold.
He had not fully prepared for the weight of it.
The level 3 shelter held, indoor temperature set at 12 degrees with the stove running, but every trip outside required moving fast, layered, and with at least 4 gene-fused hunting ants as escort.
At these temperatures, a mutated beast that had been manageable at -15 was now unpredictable, driven toward food sources by the cold pressure.
The sentry ant relay picked up 2 incursions in the first 24 hours.
A silver mutated wolf approached the 500-meter perimeter from the northeast, nose tracking something through the fence line.
The relay flagged it in seconds.
He dispatched 15 double-fused hunting ants and watched through the species contract as the confrontation resolved.
It was not clean. The silver wolf's intelligence was real.
It dodged the first 3 approaches and landed 1 strike that cost him 2 hunting ants before the numbers overwhelmed it.
The beast core was silver rank. He placed it on the gene manipulator's platform, and the readout nearly doubled what the bronze core had produced.
Silver beast cores were the next tier of gene library fuel.
He messaged Will, silver cores, double bronze price, no upper limit.
The second incursion was a silver mutated black bear that attempted to circle the perimeter rather than crossing it directly.
The hole in his defensive plan, the one he had flagged and not yet fixed. The sentry ant relay caught the circling pattern 2 minutes into the approach, earlier than he had expected.
He sent the entire dispatch force and held Muwu's rapid development ability in reserve.
He did not need it.
36 double-fused hunting ants in a coordinated intercept against a circling silver beast was enough.
The bear went down at the 300-meter mark, far from the shelter fence.
He lost 4 ants.
Muwu had replacements ready by nightfall.
The cold wave's first week was a compression chamber.
Every resource decision he had made in the first 7 days was either paying dividends now or revealing itself as a miscalculation. The farmland harvest came in on day 2 of the cold wave, 10 kilograms of multi-year winter wheat, dense and cold-resistant, already the second planting cycle.
Cheongha's ripening agent was running low, and she was compounding more.
The banded production was running at 12 units per session, with Will and 2 referred hunters providing coagulation serum on a rolling schedule. The gene library, now enriched with 2 silver beast cores, was producing quality fragments that made every new hunting ant fusion a step change over the last generation.
The colony was not static.
It was evolving, adapting, becoming something the Dark World system had not accounted for when it classified black scythe ants as no-rank creatures with no abilities.
The colony that had started with 63 ants chewing his baguette had become something the Dark World would need to reclassify.
When the cold wave lifted after its full-month run, the outdoor temperature reading climbed slowly back toward 0, and then past it, and the daytime counter began recovering towards its original 8 hours. The regional counter on the morning the cold wave ended read 8,212.
Nearly 1,800 people gone across the region in 5 weeks.
He looked at the number for a long time before doing anything else.
The Dark World had delivered exactly what it promised, a disaster, a winnowing, a pressure that separated those who had prepared from those who had not had the resources or the luck or the time to do so.
He did not feel triumphant.
He felt the weight of it clearly, and then he went back to work. Muwu's colony had grown to over 300 silver hunting ants during the cold wave, fed by a meat supply chain that the hunting ants themselves had partly maintained through cold weather interior hunts organized against the beasts that had pressed the perimeter. The century ant count had passed 600, each worker carrying beginner detection and basic agility, the Queen's production expansion ability multiplying output every day. The territory felt different now. Not just defended, but inhabited, managed, alive in a way it had not been when he was a single person with a stone axe and a thatched wall. He walked the full 500-meter ring on the first warm morning after the cold wave, accompanied by 2 hunting ants who moved beside him like escort guards without being cold to.
The birch grove was still bare from the first clear-cutting.
New growth was already coming up through the snowmelt at the edges.
The gene-fused hunting ant boar pit was still open. He had been meaning to fill it or convert it into a permanent outdoor training ground. The red heart fruit tree had been stripped, its branch sent to Cheongha for cultivation, and she had already reported 2 successful seedlings.
In the farmland, the 3rd wheat cycle was sprawming.
In the medical supply atelier he had built into a corner of the level 3 shelter, 3 dozen bandage units sat in neat rows on the workbench shelf.
Cheongha's first cross-mutation experiments had produced something unexpected in the past week, a plant she was calling silvergrass, a fibrous species that yielded plant fiber at 3 times the density of any standard source and seemed to thrive in cold conditions.
The timing for the bandage supply chain was almost absurdly convenient.
Almost.
He had learned not to call coincidences coincidences in the dark world.
Everything the system produced had a shape to it, a pressure and a counterpressure, a scarcity placed exactly where capability wanted to grow. What Cheongha had grown from the seeds and branches and cross-mutation experiments was exactly the material gap his bandage production had been waiting for.
Whether that was her skill or the dark world's design or some combination of the two was a question he filed and did not answer.
The level 4 upgrade was the next structural milestone. 2,000-meter territory, silver mutated beasts in the open ground, and whatever new facility unlocks came with the tier.
Resources were not the constraint. The hunting ants' continuous lumber clearing and the trade channel income from fences and bandages had accumulated well past the upgrade requirement.
The constraint was the circumference gap problem he had identified, a silver beast with intelligence enough to circle the perimeter rather than crossing it would bypass the relay chain. The silver black bear had forced an early test of his contingency, and it had worked, but the 2,000-meter ring was 4 times the perimeter, and the relay chain would need 4 times the sentry ants to cover it at the same density.
He did not have that yet. He had 3 weeks before the second monthly natural disaster would be drawn.
Muwu's production rate with the nucleus active was 12 to 15 silver hunting ants per day.
The Century Ant Queen's production expansion at bronze tier was producing 40 to 50 workers per day.
If he delayed the level 4 upgrade by 10 days and used that time exclusively to build the perimeter relay density to cover 2,000 meters, the upgrade's danger window shrank from weeks to hours.
He set the 10-day plan and sent it to Cheongha for review. She replied within the hour, added 2 amendments he accepted immediately, and attached a silver grass fiber sample with a note that the first bulk shipment would arrive the following morning. She signed it with her name and a small postscript that said, "Little Green had approved of the plan."
He smiled at the screen before he could stop himself. An ally who consults a world tree.
A silver queen who comments on the quality of his cooking.
A former police officer in another region who laughed and said he wanted to call the police too on the very first night, who was now the most reliable beast hunter in his trade network.
Just the precautions, the manual, the fire, and the understanding that whatever happened next would require him to be faster and more deliberate than the world was being.
The ant army had been an accident at first. 63 opportunistic thieves chewing his one piece of food on his first real night.
Now Mo Wu led a colony of silver hunters and bronze scouts. The farmland produced wheat on a 10-day cycle. The shelter was rated to handle the next cold wave without structural stress. And the bandage production line was the kind of quiet advantage that did not show up in combat rankings, but showed up in who was still alive 3 disasters later.
He was not the strongest person in the dark world.
He knew that without certainty, but believed it without doubt.
Somewhere in 800,000 regions, someone had rolled a gold item from a gold chest on day 1 and built a straightforward combat path from that foundation.
Someone had upgraded to level 4 before the cold wave and already had silver mutated beasts cataloged and categorized.
Someone was thinking about things he had not thought of yet, from angles he could not model because he did not have their information.
The dark world was not a competition he had won.
It was a compression system he had survived so far, and surviving so far was not the same as surviving what came next.
But the foundation was real.
The colony was real. The alliance was real.
The medical supply chain, the gene library, the beast core pipeline, the level 3 shelter with insulation ratings that held through -30, all of it real. All of it built in 5 weeks from a no-rank stone axe and 63 ants who had been trying to eat his bread.
He walked back to the shelter as the afternoon light shortened and the temperature dropped again, already planning tomorrow.
Inside, Mu Wu was in her breeding chamber. He could feel her through the species contract. Not commands, not biological signals, but something that registered in the channel she had opened after the silver evolution.
A steady, patient attention turned in his direction. A queen tending her colony, waiting for the next instruction.
He settled at the workbench, picked up a bandage kit, and started working through the evening session.
Fences on the trade channel.
Bandages for the medical line.
Silver grass fiber from Cheongha's morning shipment.
Beast core fragments from Will's latest bronze hunt, ready for the Manipulator.
The stove burned through the first log, and he added a second without looking up. The Dark World's second monthly disaster had not been drawn yet.
The precautions had promised one per month, and the voice's definition of random was something he had learned to treat as deliberately structured.
The cold wave had targeted survival and resource preparation.
The next one would target something else. What he could not know.
What he could know was his own preparation, his own supply lines, his own colony's capabilities and limits.
He knew those things precisely.
38 double-fused silver hunting ants, growing to 50 before the level 4 upgrade.
612 sentry ants, perimeter relay running without gaps at 500 meters.
Mu at silver, 2 gene fusion slots available when the right material presented itself.
Sentry ant queen at bronze ceiling, breakable with special items or skills if he found the right ones.
A beast core gene library containing 2 silver rank cores and 12 bronze rank cores, with more incoming.
A medical supply chain producing 12 bandages per session with silver grass fiber as the new base material. An alliance that had already exchanged over 500 units of spring water, dozens of plant mutations, 300 units of wheat seeds, and 1 gold rank mutual aid contract. A trade network spanning Will Porter's hunting operation, Yo Hee-saw's adhesive production, Yi-Ki-chan's stone supply, and a growing referral list of hunters who needed medical support to stay operational.
He was not safe.
He was ready. The Dark World had taken 8 billion people from their lives without warning or permission and dropped them into thatched huts with bonfires and told them to survive.
It had given them a voice that said, "Good luck favors those who strive," and then waited to see how many would believe that and act on it.
He had believed it. Not because the voice deserved trust,
But because the alternative was sitting still in the dark, waiting for the flame to go out.
Mo Wu rustled in her chamber, a soft, satisfied sound that the species contract carried to him without words.
He did not look up from the workbench.
He knew what she was saying.
The colony was fed, the eggs were laid, the army was growing.
Everything was proceeding. He added a third log to the stove, checked the panel, outdoor temperature -8, daytime remaining 4 hours, 2 minutes, and returned to work. Cheongha's first silvergrass shipment would arrive tomorrow.
Will's beast cores would follow in the afternoon.
The level 4 upgrade would come in 10 days when the perimeter relay was ready. The second monthly disaster would come when it came. He had a queen who spoke to him, an ally who spoke to a tree, and 63 ants that had started everything by trying to steal his dinner.
The Dark World had called him a survivor.
He had taken that as a minimum and kept going.
The bonfire burned.
The ants worked through the night,